Good evening. Salam alaikum. It's very nice to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. My skepticism about rational arguments for the existence of God, I don't think springs from any general skepticism about the world. And I certainly think that we should form our beliefs only in relation to the evidence presented to us. I just don't find that the evidence for the existence of God is particularly compelling. But the speaker before me dwelt on the third, and I think probably the best of the three great rational arguments for the existence of God. There's the ontological argument, which attempts to prove God through a definition. Really, the definition is God is by definition the greatest thing of which you could conceive. Obviously, something existing is greater than something non-existing. So simply from the fact that God is the greatest thing of which you can conceive, it follows that he exists. And that's a splendid argument that's been troubling philosophers for hundreds of years. But I think, again, to draw on what the first speaker said, the consensus is that the argument just doesn't work. The second of the three great arguments for the existence of God is the teleological argument, which John dwelt on a little, which is that the universe exhibits order. Order implies an orderer, and therefore there's a God. And again, the consensus is that that argument doesn't work, because order does not imply an orderer. And that leaves us with the cosmological argument, which is the argument which the previous speaker had brought up. And the cosmological argument exists in a number of forms, and the form that we had this evening was that there is a first cause. If you track back the universe to its beginning, and you get to the beginning, something must have caused it to happen. What could possibly have caused it to happen? And therefore God exists. But the problem is, and this will sort of tie into what I want to say in the second half of my talk, and I can probably warn you at the start that I'll probably give the 2 minutes back, because I'm feeling a little out of my league amongst all these experts. But the cosmological argument says this, that what happened at the beginning of the universe? What was the cause of the first event? And the thought is, well, there must have been another event that caused the first event. Well, it's very difficult to see how that can solve anything, because the answer, if you were troubled by what was the cause of the first event, how on earth are you not going to be troubled by told there's another event that caused the first event? I mean, the argument just won't help. But if you think there's a problem with the first event, how's that solved by saying there's another event before it? So the cosmological argument, it seems to me that it won't help. But I would also like to just reiterate, although this does sound, arguments from authority are always terribly unsatisfactory, but if the question is there a rational proof for the existence of God? Well, it's a fact. It's a matter of logic and rationality and expertise as to whether the cosmological argument holds water. And the consensus is it does not hold water. And I suspect the consensus is it does not hold water, partly for the reasons that I've adduced. So what's the general... let me give, as it's my 10 minutes, I'll give my view as to what the general problem is with rational proofs of the existence of God. And the general problem is as follows, I think. And it's very difficult to think coherently about God for the following reason. That if we try and describe God's attributes, we want to say that God has certain properties. God is powerful, God is good, God is mighty, God is knowing, and we feel we understand those properties. We get a grip on what it means to be powerful, to be good, to be all-knowing. So we have this notion of a God as somebody who has these properties in a very high degree. But now we have a bit of a dilemma, because if we to keep our grasp of what those properties are, what goodness is, what power is, what knowledge is, and we think we know what it is for somebody to have these properties, and God has these properties to a very great extent, that makes him seem just like an extremely good, powerful, knowing human being. Okay? The problem with that is it gives us an opportunity to become God. We just have to have these properties in a very high degree. So of course religions don't say that, because that would not be in the tenor of religious thinking, to think that they all have the potential to become God just by exemplifying these properties to very high degrees. So what religions tend to say is that God is divine, God is a transcendental figure. But the trouble with divine and transcendental figures is they can't be defined in worldly terms. Indeed, transcendental figures can only really just be defined negatively. So you say God is someone outside space, God is somebody outside time, God is somebody who has these properties, not in any way a human has these properties, but in some kind of superhuman way. So it's not that God knows as much as a very, very, very clever human being would know, but God's knowledge is a transcendental knowledge. But the trouble with that is you then have to choose. You have to choose whether you stick in the realm of the human and you know what you're talking about, you know what knowledge is, you know what goodness is, or shift to the realm of the transcendental. Well, what do these terms mean if they're not the kind of terms that apply to human beings? What's worse is it becomes difficult to actually say things that we'd want to say if we were religious. So, for example, most of the great theistic religions think that we should love God, that we love God. But God is defined entirely negatively, so God has no positive attributes, has no attributes that we can understand, we can grasp. And it just seems to me very difficult, and it might just be that I'm dimmer than the rest of you, but it seems to me difficult to get my head round how we can love something when we have no clue, almost by definition, of that thing's properties. It can only be defined negatively. What kind of love could that be? So I find it very difficult to think coherently if I start thinking rationally about God. I just find that it's very difficult to think coherently about God, because by definition, God is put beyond our understanding. And how can you think coherently about something that in principle is beyond your understanding? And I think it's these kinds of thoughts that have informed philosophers such as David Hume and Ludwig Wittgenstein in their thinking about God and about religion. So oh dear, you really are being shortchanged by me, but never mind. To sum up my ruminations on this, I don't grasp how the cosmological argument is supposed to solve the puzzle that it sets up at the beginning. And I think this is part of the problem, that if we try and think to a first cause that is not in the causal realm, that's a specific instance of the problem of trying to think facts about God when God is not in the realm of understanding. I think if we try and reason from our human perspectives, we're not going to get to anything which a theist will call God. And if we do get somewhere from our human perspective, then all we get is a kind of idealized human being, and that clearly isn't God either. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.